Hello, Uganda. Good evening and welcome to the show On the Spot. My name is Patrick Kamara. Tonight, we want to burrow into 4 different areas of concern in our country this evening, and let me let you know what is going to come. We want to look into the NRM's initiative to amend the UPDF Act following the Supreme Court ruling. Tonight, we also want to look into the security forces' raid on the National Unity Platform offices and the arrest of party officials. We want to look at the legal proceedings following Dr. Kizza Besigye's, involving Dr. Kizza Besigye amid its political tensions. And of course, President Yoweri Museveni has been trotting the nation the PDM assessment tours. Is this a strategic move ahead of the 2026 elections? To examine the current political landscape, I have 2 guests, and they are Mr. Nicholas Opio. He's a lawyer and human rights activist. Thank you so much for joining us, Nicholas. Good evening, sir.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be back in the studio and to be on the spot.
I have another political analyst, Mr. Timothy Chimonges. Thank you so much for joining us. Timothy, good evening, sir.
Thank you, Patrick. Good evening to our viewers. Glad to be here.
So, both of you gentlemen, I extend a warm welcome to you, and thank you for having honored our invitation to be on this show. Let me first get into the issue of the NRM caucus trying to amend the UPDF Act after the Supreme Court ruling that says civilians should not be tried by the military court. What do you read from this? How is it likely to snowball and into what?
Well, the Supreme Court in its decision offered a couple of advisory opinions. The Chief Justice, I think, worded it differently, that there are directive advisories to the executive to reform the military justice system as a whole. They offered a raft of proposals, but even before those proposals were made by the Supreme Court, the Minister of Defense in June of last year had tabled an amendment before Parliament that sought to amend the UPDF Act, a 64-page bill that sought to amend a raft of provisions of the UPDF Act. And so when the Supreme Court made its decision, the Minister of Defense, following the advice of the NRM caucus, withdrew the original amendment that they had proposed in Parliament, and in a caucus meeting came up with what I saw as broad guiding principles for the amendment of the UPDF Act to accommodate the proposals by the Supreme Court. So there were broad statements of facts and principles of amendment. First, it appears from their statement that they want to retain jurisdiction over trials of civilians. If that is the case, that would be contrary to the judgment of the Supreme Court. In fact, if they went ahead to do that, they would be in violation of Article 92 of the Constitution, that prohibits Parliament from enacting a law to vary a decision of the court as to the disputes between the parties. The Attorney General was a party in that dispute before the Supreme Court. They cannot now run to amend the law to try and reverse the decision of the Supreme Court. But it appears that's what they want to do. The second thing for me that I read into this is that the military court system had become a weapon in a political contest. A useful weapon in the hands of people in power. It is not an accident that increasingly you see opponents of the system being dragged before the military court system. The lessons of the last election showed us that that court system became a very important tool for the whipping of opposition-leaning elements in the country. If you recall, the young people arrested from Kalangala Island spent years in military court system. Many of them ended up pleading guilty to offenses they never committed. That court became a useful tool in the toolbox of the system in responding to the elections. So I see that these proposals being discussed by the NRM caucus mirrors the same attitude, same approach to try and retain that elements of cohesion, and the amendments will try and reintroduce the trials of non-military people in the military court system.
So, Timothy, according to the background that Nicholas has just given, that you cannot be able to change the ruling of the Supreme Court using the parliamentary, legislative agenda. But it looks like the NRM caucus and the president are actually focused at doing exactly that. That is unconstitutional, and I'm sure it's going to be challenged in courts of law. Yeah. From your perspective, what do you read from this?
I think that we have to look at this from a political angle, because this is not a legal question. This is a political process that those with the power are hell-bent to ensure that their political desires, their political directions are realized through some sort of a legal framework. And I think that the Attorney General finds himself in a very precarious place to manage the politics, but also to comply with the legal framework, which is a very hard place to find oneself. And also, this should also be looked at from a perspective of the militarism, that the question of militarism and the civilian approach and the perspective to that. Because you see, there is a very firm, some of the statements that we've seen, especially from the CDF and those from the president, you see that the status quo around ensuring that the military or the military rule, supersedes the civilian rule, and there's all mechanism to ensure that this still remains, but of course trying to cover that within the legal framework. And so I think that looking at that in those two lenses, the political angle, but also the question about the militarism, that in one way or another has entrenched itself in our system, and that even how, as the people, we look at the question of how we operate as a society, you find that that's the angle that we are also taking in looking at this. But also, more importantly, I think that looking at where we are heading, in the coming elections, and how these specific courts have been used in the past to settle scores, the political scores, but also to a mechanism of managing people. The imagination that gets off your hand is something that takes the status quo, especially.
But Timothy, what is intriguing is that you have a gentleman who is serving in prison, who is facing very serious charges of terrorism, actually is accused of even having an army in the Congo, arrested in Tanzania, brought to Uganda, is in a civilian court, and yet when you compare them, the allegations is facing are so hardcore than even the 8 bullets and the pistol of Dr. Besigye in Nairobi. I'm talking about Jamil Mukulu.
Yeah. I mean, looking again, you see, it's a question of politics. These are politics being handled in a legal framework. And that's why I think that looking at the proposal of the Supreme Court to ensure that, to allow for the court-martial to operate within the legal framework as proposed by the Supreme Court, it does not serve the interest of, of the government, but also the individuals that seems to be pushing for this. And also looking at the cases that are being tried, including that you highlight, the one that Kizza Besigye and the NUP colleagues are facing, together with those the Karachunas, you see that all these have a political angle in how they are being dealt, and the political class cannot allow that to go. But I think as day turns, as time evolves, we are likely to see a situation where this matter again will go back to the courts. So it's going to be, but also more importantly, I think that not to put blame anywhere really, the ambiguity around the ambiguity by the Supreme Court, its ruling, provides a leeway for the government to have to continue.
You wanted them to be decisive in which manner?
I mean, the Supreme Court's ruling should be very clear, not to provide room for people to guess.
Interpret differently.
That the Supreme Court, and you've seen how those the government colleagues have actually shifted the narrative in a manner that serves them. You've seen those in the opposition equally trying to push a specific. So that's a confusion.
Nicholas, did the ruling lack some form of clarity?
No, absolutely not. I think that two things. First, to answer the question about Mukulu and Thomas Koyelo being tried in a different court, when they appear to have committed even graver offenses against the state, you have to understand the nature of international crimes. International crimes is distinct from domestic crimes. The allegations against Dr. Besigye is a domestic municipal crime that is handled in accordance with domestic municipal law. Namely, in this case, you go to the High Court and you charge them, or you take them to, as they try to do, to the military court. But Mukulu and Thomas Koyelo were accused of committing international crimes, crimes that shock the conscience of the international community, namely crimes under the ICC Act, or crimes that were first encapsulated in the Rome Statute, then domesticated in Uganda under the ICC Act. And there's a specific court for those crimes. And that's why you find Mukulu and Thomas Koyelo before the ICD, the International Crimes Division of the High Court. So the distinction has to be very clear so that people who don't understand the law understand it. But to come back to the Supreme Court was very clear in what its orders were. What I think is the problem is that many people expected that, having found that the trials of civilians before the military court were ab initio unlawful, they should have then ordered for release. They should have freed suspects. The court, in its wisdom, chose not to do so and made a very clear order that they must be transferred to a civilian court. The orders of the court are very clear. It is the implementation of those orders in bad faith that is causing the confusion. Because the court said, transfer the cases immediately. So the 1st of February, a well-meaning executive should have commenced the process of transferring cases to a civilian court. Essentially, it meant that you would fold your file in the General Court Martial and hand them over to the DPP and say, here are the files we have, here's the evidence, make your own assessment.
But also it appears the
court was very clear.
It appears the ruling also meant, Nicholas, that more or less the Supreme Court does not recognize the military court. So how do you transfer from something that is not recognized to the civilian court?
No, the military court is a unit in the broader military system. There is a Ministry of Defense. Having nullified the actions of the courts martials in its different forms, the military still has a Ministry of Defense with a legal department who could simply take up that duty of transferring cases. Secondly, what the court actually did was that the court did not declare the General Court Martial unlawful. The court said the General Court Martials are lawful but subordinate to civilian authority. The court then found, in this respect, in two aspects. The first aspect was that the summary trial procedures and the unit disciplinary courts were not courts of judicature. In fact, they were merely tribunals for disciplinary hearing. Second, on the other hand, found that the General Court Martial and the courts above it were indeed legitimate and lawful constitutional courts, but that in its composition, as it is now, it is incapable of giving people due process, and therefore said its operations must stop and the state must make sure that court is able to give due process, namely appoint judges who are qualified as lawyers to adjudicate cases, provide them with security of tenure, because people who are on the court martial had no legal training. In fact, a bodyguard could sit there and determine a case of murder. People who are on the court martial had no security of tenure. They are appointed on an annual basis. Their rules require them to take command from their appointing authority So the court could adjourn to go and call the High Command to ask on a particular point of,
how do we go about
interest.
this?
Yes. So the court said, reform that system, and if you reform it, then that becomes a proper court. Thirdly, the Supreme Court said, in specific exceptional circumstances, certain categories of civilians could be tried before that military court. Take, for instance, if the UPDF is deployed as it is in Somalia, and they have civilian staff in Somalia, and those staff members commit crimes, the court said they could be tried because those crimes were committed outside the jurisdiction of the ordinary civilian courts. And so the Supreme Court was extremely clear in its orders. It is just the implementation and the application of those rulings that are being done
without need motive and intention. Okay.
Bad faith.
Timothy Chimangas, what does that mean in terms of the civil-military relations in case they go through and then the military court is restored? And how does it impact the civil liberties and human rights?
Yeah, so it's also from the manner that this court has been handled in the past that creates a lot of all these discussions that we've seen. And looking at it from also a political tool that it has been used in the past to deal with civilians. And I think that from the ruling really, the biggest group of beneficiaries have been the military, the men in uniform, partly because of the mechanism and how the Supreme Court has opened for their trial and some of the opportunities they have in appealing the matters that have been brought against them. And so I think that this is a good opportunity really for us as a country in terms of when we speak about the question of human rights, when we speak on the liberties of the people, because they are based on the Constitution, and that they are very clear in terms of the presumption of innocence, the questions of the ability of court being independent and being able to administer that justice. And so I think that it's to the extent of the capacity of these courts to administer the justice. If they are not able to do that, then it falls short below the constitutional guidelines. And so I think that looking at all this beyond the questions of the legalities, it goes to first the question of the goodwill of the state and government of the government really to implement on this ruling, because partly it does not serve their interest, and that it's also not fair to expect a monkey to be the one
to cut down the forest.
It's not possible.
But Nicholas, the military courts is just not new. It's not just only exclusive to Uganda. They are in other parts of the world, including developed countries. Yeah. Why do we find it so hard? I mean, to accept them. It's in other countries, even I'm told developed democracies do have them.
No, military court systems all over the world exist. What is peculiar about the Ugandan military court system, first, is the manner in which it is being used to achieve a political objective. It's being weaponized. Secondly, I have not known any court in the world that is presided over by people who have no legal training. There's no pretense about it. I've been to that court. I have defended people before that court. It is not a court of law. The judges or the people who call themselves judges in that court have no single training in the law, and yet they can sentence you to death. They can sentence you to long periods of detention. Imagine, I think the Chief Justice in his hilarious self said it's equivalent to asking a lawyer to go to a theater to carry out an operation. He has no idea the difference between a liver and a pancreas or a lung. He might as well just cut anything else in your body. So you have people who are untrained.
Who tell you, you know what? Oh, sorry, we cut it wrongly.
It was an oversight.
That is what is unique with the Ugandan court system, in the military system. The third thing is this. Military courts all over the world not just have lawyers who are adjudicating the matter. In Uganda, you only have prosecutors who are lawyer and somebody who calls himself a judge advocate in that court, who is supposed to advise the court. Advice is discretionary. They can accept it or reject it. So you have an advocate of the High Court sitting in an advisory role. You have advocates prosecuting a case, but the people who are deciding it are laymen and women. Really, that is what is unique about this court. The third thing that is funny about this court is that it is the only court I know that has no security of tenure. Many times in the past, that court has been rendered without any case to hear because the president hasn't found the time to give them a new instrument of appointment, sometimes 4 months. And then after 6 months, it has to come up again for renewal. So you have a court that is really sitting at the whim and will of the appointing authority. They have no security of tenure. The thing that makes a judge courageous to do what they have to do is that they have security of tenure. They can make difficult decisions and we must live with it. These people who are in the General Court Martial were unable to make any difficult decision at all. It just became a court to process illegalities, to process injustice.
You know, Timothy, without getting into problems of sub judice, because this is now before court, but really getting somebody from Nairobi the way that they did, and you know, disregarding all the protocols that are supposed to have been followed, is in itself a problem. And I'm wondering how the government in Kenya, maybe did they decide to say, we do not know, you look funny, you get embarrassed, than saying we know if, because it's like they are damned if they did and they're damned if they don't. Because if there was a case, Dr. Besigye should be serving somewhere in community prisons, not in Nigeria.
Yeah, I think that there are two things for me on that. The first is that I think the government sometimes, while their intentions may be very clear, they may be having a clear cause, the process that they choose to take undermines the overall objectives. And that is not, it's not the first time that's happening. Understanding that there could have been whatever evidence that they have against Kizza Besigye, if the process that they undertook to, to have that done undermines the overall objective. And to this end, we've not actually gone into the substantive issues of the matter. We are still into, and we still have a long way, and I think we'll wait when the matter now starts the process.
Nicholas, it's either an embarrassment to the government and the system in Kenya, or they're clearly in cahoots.
No, Kenya has become the capital of abductions in East Africa. It's not just Kizza Besigye, it's many other dissidents who have been unlawfully renditioned from Kenya. Kenya has taken a turn that many of us who had hoped that that country was more democratic is worrying. Cases of people being disappeared and killed in Kenya have become common. Lawyers defending clients in court show up in court and turn up dead on riverbanks. So Kenya has become a capital for rendition. Our good friend Maria, a Tanzanian activist, was also abducted. It took a lot of noise and effort for her to resurface. They were about to rendition her to Tanzania. And so Kenya has become a capital for rendition. But secondly, what has passed people's analysis here is that there is a tacit cooperation between the East African states on what they call security cooperation, which is allowed under the East African Community Treaty. But I think that what was envisaged under the treaty was cooperation in exchange of intelligence and information. It was not cooperation to break rendition laws, to unlawfully abduct people and turn them over to a country where they are facing imminent danger. And so there's a misreading and misapplication of the cooperation clause in the East African Treaty to justify these unlawful actions. Because somebody asked the question, now that Kizza Besigye has been charged before the High Court, what happened to the guns? It's not in the charge sheet. It's not in the summary of evidence. They now bring a charge of treason. What happened to the charge of possession of firearms? What happened to what they alleged was a sack of money found in the room where he was being kept? this is exactly the same thing that happened after Arua, when the new president then was People Power was arrested. Guns were paraded, phones, and SIM cards. But when the moment for trial came, those things disappeared in thin air. In my analysis, I think that is a manifestation of people who are trying to fix him.
So, Timothy, for Kenya
try and manufacture a case. So Kenya has become an accomplice in this. The third thing, Kamara, if I may, is that Ugandan intelligence operatives have been resident in Kenya for a very long time. Many of us who have done human rights work and investigations can tell you names and rank and numbers of Ugandan intelligence officers roaming Nairobi, because they believe that there is a brewing cooperation between the Ugandan opposition and the Kenyan opposition, and they don't want that to materialize. If it did, in their analysis, it would be dangerous for Kampala. So they have to nip it in the bud in Nairobi.
So Timothy, was it a strategy for Kenya to say we have no idea how this happened, just to avoid to be entangled in legal battles with Uganda and answer many questions? Maybe just decided to
but remember, before Kizza Besigye,
to get embarrassed and say I don't know.
Before Kizza Besigye,
some guys just running in my
Kisumu lot was also picked up from Kenya.
The FDC, the
youth, yeah. 36.
The 36. Oh, the 33 is Arua.
Yeah. So I think that Kenya finds itself in a very interesting place, and we've had this discussion even recently when they lost the race to AU chairmanship, in terms of how they've managed to handle the regional and the international issues. And when you look at their position in light of Kizza Besigye, you find that it's a country that has been cornered, and that it would be extremely hard for a state to say that we knew, and then again you're being implicated, and you choose to take the safer, what would be the safer angle in their case. But it's almost impossible. We have borders, and all these are very clear. Looking at the manner in which the Kizza Besigye was arrested, but also broadly speaking, I think that even as we look at the Kizza Besigye and Kenya, how Kenya has continued to handle its international relations and both within the region and globally is quite interesting, and it speaks to either lack of strategy or either a very deliberate approach in managing. In participating in the political processes of different countries. It's not just Uganda. Kenya has also been accused of DRC issues. We've also had issues now currently Sudan, where a section of what would be called those that are against the government in Sudan are given
rapid
platform.
response force.
But Nicholas, when you are a lawyer and especially distinguished at that, at the level of Kirio Kiwanuka, with one of the law firms in town that has a high name recognition, and then you become Attorney General, and you find yourselves defending some of these things, it must be quite between a rock and a hard place.
No, I think for me there is a misconception. I mean, the AG is an excellent lawyer, I know that for a fact.
Yes. But what he's doing, it doesn't seem to be excellent.
I think there is a misconception of the role of the Attorney General. In many countries, the Attorney General is the defender of public interest. He's the custodian of the rule of law. He's the #1 lawyer in the country. He's the head of the bar. He is not the president's lawyer. He's not the ruling party lawyer. But I think consistently, that office has been treated as though it is the lawyer for the president or the lawyer for the executive. But I think far from it. Anybody put in that position will find it very difficult to be objective. Think about all the past attorney generals. They've all had similar difficulties. One was a Harvard.
Then you might have to withdraw the perception you have of him of being very, very intelligent.
One was a Harvard graduate, first people to get first-class degrees from the law school, Professor Kidu Makubia. How did it end for him? It came to Nyombi. How did it end for him? So it's a difficult job that if you take it, you must know that you're going to find yourself in an extremely difficult position. And the current AG finds himself in the same position. The choice is really his, because he can choose to acquiesce in that sort of thing or choose to do the right thing or walk away. I think he hasn't made a choice yet.
Okay, I've been hearing, Timothy, people say the cadre judges or the judicial system is corrupt, is unfair, probably is also being used as a tool. I mean, well, Dr. Besigye or whoever, they can come to the civilian court, but if those allegations are true, that somebody is having them on a joystick, then he can still get what he wants.
Yeah, maybe two things. The first is around, maybe just to weigh in on the issue of the Attorney General. Because Attorney General is a reflection of how the government has dealt with institutions and individuals. And it becomes extremely hard because irrespective of what institution you serve, it's not just the AG, or most institutions, and now the question to the judiciary, where there has been the question of an extension of the executive having a bit of influence, and the criteria even for having most of those individuals to serve in that. There's a very clear criteria, and on top of it is cadre, are you a cadre? And then the rest of the things can come on board. And I think that
just to be fair to the judges.
Are you really?
No, just to be fair to my colleagues on the bench. Some of Uganda's best judges have been cadres. I can tell you with history, Justice Mulenga, who we all venerate, was a cadre, was a political partisan actor. Justice Sekoko, Justice Kanyahamba. So being a cadre in and of itself is not a problem. What is a problem is when a judge begins to use their position to subvert the cause of justice. It is when a judge is unable to resist the pressure from private sector as well as people in the executive. That is a problem. It is not where they have come from as party actors. The last thing is about competence. If you're giving us judges, give us competent judges. It doesn't matter if they're NRM leaning. If they are competent, they will pay their fidelity to the law.
No, some of us are not lawyers, Nicholas. When you look into your profession nowadays, we wonder because...
Be careful, you might need a lawyer tomorrow.
No, yeah, I know. No. Yeah, I need a lawyer tomorrow. But I mean, we need the lawyers every day. But now there is a new tendency of this business of banging tables and this the legal rebel. I'm talking about the president of the society, of the Uganda Law Society.
Yeah.
He is taking a certain trend that is quite unique and quite funny, quite intriguing, and we're like, is this where you wanted?
No, the law profession is a noble profession.
Yes, it is. But
it is a much respected profession. Yes, it is, yes. But like all professions, we pick from our society, and people carry their own characters from the society and bring it to the profession. What you're seeing in the law society, in my own considered view, does not represent what I know to be the legal noble profession. As a profession of etiquette, a profession of decorum, a profession of courtesy. What is happening? A lot of profanities. What is happening is that is the generation of lawyers we have brought forward. It's a reflection of people's frustrations. It's a reflection of our impatience with what is clearly a broken justice system. And the only instrument they have is to use the power of their word. We may object to it, as I do, but they are within their rights to express themselves. And in doing so, I think, makes the profession look bad. But instead of focusing, I think, on their profanities, on their mannerism, it might serve us a whole lot better if you address the concerns that has driven them to stand on the table and say the things they're saying.
Yes. So the issue is there's a problem in the country. Is reflected in how they behave there's some element of anger, and then you're like, okay, we've done ABCD, but you're not listening. For example, you exhaust all the legal requirements, for example, to have Besigye freed, and sometimes somebody is free today and is arrested tomorrow. So you find that every legal mechanism has been exhausted, and the executive or the police is not listening. So that drives somebody crazy. In fact, I remember back in the day when we were in school, we used to read this book, a very small playbook called Betrayal in the City. And I remember, I think one of the writers was saying, sometimes when the madness of an entire nation disturbs the solitary mind, that it's not enough to say the man is mad. You remember that?
Yes.
So in fact, I think when I look at the president of Uganda Law Society, I think it's the madness of the entire nation that has disturbed the solitary mind. And maybe we can even say, is he crazy?
I think, Patrick, extreme measures sometimes, extreme measures in fight, extreme circumstances sometimes requires extreme measures, and I think approaches should respond to the circumstances. And today, one of the biggest challenges has been the question of bureaucracy, and that how the status quo has utilized those to either frustrate justice, also how things are happening. And so the Law Society and its leadership, it's a reflection of where we are at today, because it's not just in the legal fraternity. We see that even in the legislature. We see that in the elective positions that we're having today, where you have society resorting to different categories of people who have actually who are promoting different approaches to resolving, to the normal ways of resolving issues, what would otherwise be called the bureaucratic measures. And so I think that, just going back to the point that you had asked earlier, and I think Nicholas had highlighted on it, is that the questions around the politics in terms of how people get into these positions sometimes overweigh your professionalism. We've not just seen this in the judiciary. Looking at even some of the in the Ministry of Finance and these other government bodies that ideally by experience, by profession, they are rightly there. But the overwhelming pressure that comes with political office and your ability to resist them, again, lies with you, but the circumstances can be extreme. And so someone like Chiriwa Chuanuka, the AG, professional guy, he's served the country in very interesting manner. But if push comes to shoves in matters between professionalism and the politics, the political interest, you are definitely likely to see the political wing taking the day. All right.
Timothy Chimonges and Mr. Nicholas Opio, gentlemen, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, let's look into the electoral violence that we saw yesterday at the nomination for the Kawempe by-election, but also the break-in into the National Unity Platform office. What does that mean, and what does it point at as we go into the general elections this year? We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching On The Spot. My name is Patrick Amar. My guests tonight are Mr. Nicholas Opio, who's a lawyer, and also Mr. Timothy Chimonges. Gentlemen, I want to switch gears now and look into the issues affecting National Unity Platform. Yesterday, the nomination for the Kawempe by-election, you know, we saw people were clobbered on the streets of Kampala, including a journalist who was clobbered very badly. And then the journalists who tried to follow the arrest of, for example, Mr. Nalukola, is bundled in a pickup. His shirt is torn. He turned around and thrown into the ditch and up and beaten and taken to Kawempe and then released. And you wonder why would the state behave in this manner? Prior to that, there was a breaking into the NUP offices. You break in like a robber, yet you're a government, you have authority of the power. You can just come and say, I have this such warrant, open your offices, and everybody's there and take what you want, and everything is recorded. Why do they behave in the manner that they do? Timothy, what do you make of that?
I think the state, same script, same everything in the same times as we head towards the general elections, where you see the high-handedness of the state uncalled for, like for yesterday's situation, uncalled for situation where you have the overzealous individuals, you know, attempting to exercise what is not there. And I think that these are very deliberate. There is no mistake in terms of what's happening, in terms of clobbering people and all these kind of things that are happening. Very clear message being communicated in terms of how the upcoming elections are coming. But also specifically to this, I think that if you look at the category of people, or the people who are being clobbered and who are facing the wrath of these individuals, some are masked and very ugly, are largely from one group of one political wing. And it speaks to the point that I think there is a deliberate communication in terms of how people should, deal with elections in the subsequent. Unfortunately, it comes with a lot of cost. We've seen the journalists, the eyes may not get to see, at least from the reports that we read, a lot of people and all these arrests. When you link with the raids or the searches, as they want to call it, in the political parties, it's a clear message. In politics, nothing happens out of a mere coincidence.
Nicholas, is this a dry run intended to intimidate, or maybe there's some overzealous officer who just goes on the street and does this crazy stuff? By the way, and they end up gifting the people they are trying to arrest, giving them some kind of publicity that, for example, yesterday, Mr. Nalukola was on every platform, social media, legacy media, and whatever it is across this country. If he wanted to pay money to get that kind of platform, it would be in billions. But was handed on a silver platter, even though he had also to get some batons.
No, it's a silly season. It's upon us. I think that in football parlance, this is pre-season.
This is it now?
Yeah. You test your players and see if they're ready for the season. Because I took a very careful look at the footage that was coming in from those incidents. You saw people in brand new uniforms, shiny guns, clean boots, and new equipment, new cars. Clearly,
it's a dry run.
It's a dry run. It is, and today they have proposed that you journalists must all go for trainings in Chankwanzi. They are actively now recruiting what they call electoral constables. I've seen radio messages going to DPCs across the country to recruit NRM-leaning individuals as election constables. So the preparations for the next election is in high gear. Kawempe North is showing you what is going to happen. And this is no different, Tamara. When I was a little boy in 1996, following an election of my own relative, Norbert Mao, my own brother, in Gulu municipality, we began to see these same things. Army trucks driving into Mao's crowd and killing people. We saw that in Besigye's election in Namamve, army trucks driving into and killing people, shooting and killing people. In the last election, what happened to this journalist was the same very thing that happened to a journalist called Moses Bwayo, shot in the eye with a canister, almost lost his eye. Bwayo now lives in exile. So what we are witnessing is really a dry run. They're showing you this is how the election is going to be run.
Or Jimmy Akena, who was clobbered on the head by a guy who was down on the street. He had surrendered to them, and they kept beating him
his head.
and in his head. As long as they needed.
Especially, and this is going to be especially so in areas of opposition stronghold. Secondly, from the last election, the establishment has taken elections not as an election, but rather as an insurrection. The posture they have now taken is that these elections are insurrections, and they must deal with the people as though they're insurrectionists. President Museveni himself said so. He said after the November 19th and 18th incident in 2020, he said first these were rioters, these were bad elements, and In the end, it changed from rioters to people who are beating NRM supporters on the street, and then changed to insurrectionists. He blamed dead people for being insurrectionists and took the posture that they took and did the election that they did. The same attitude is being carried forward in this election. The posture being taken is militaristic. It is not as though we are going into an election. It's as though it's going into a war.
What do you make of the perception that is created by some of the NUP supporters when they try to go into the marching and more or less like military drills within their premises? And also there was this young man who was talking things on social media. I know anybody could do it, but you put on what looks like NUP paraphernalia, and then you talk things and threaten violence that you shall behead some of these NRM things. So isn't that in itself creating an element of fear on the other side, and then they will say we are coming for you?
I think if there are clear breaches of the law, as government would want to put it, definitely there's a clear legal framework to take. But also more importantly, I think that there wouldn't be any threat if the manner in which, and I would imagine some of these things not just happen in these political parties, unless it has explicitly come out that the group are actually very deliberate in their actions. And so I think the state is overriding on the actions of the NUP, but also if there is any other information that probably is not available to the public, I think those are very clear to be prosecuted.
Okay, Nicholas, what do you make, Nicholas, of this military drill kind of character that in some cases that NUP has also tried to project themselves?
But what is the military drill?
No,
I think that
they may look like well, stunts or skits or whatever they are, but they are pointing to something.
We are reading too much into so little. The argument with NUP didn't begin with the parade they held on the birthday of their leader. The argument with NUP began with the attire they are wearing, whether the overall of NUP, which is red, is in fact a militaristic attire, or an attire the preserver of the armed forces. We began to discuss the beret, whether a red beret is now a preserve of the armed forces. So it was never about that parade. The parade may have been the thing that instigated the recent raid in their offices, but the regime has never taken NUP as a legitimate, lawful political party. They have treated them as though they are insurrectionists. They've accused NUP people of all manners of things. Some of them are ridiculous. Olivia Lutai spent 4 years in jail with 21 others accused of holding 2 bullets in a dustbin in a residence they don't even know when they were already in jail. So this thing about there's nothing wrong about people marching and behaving like scouts or as some formations in their offices. There's nothing unlawful. They didn't have guns. At least we don't know if they had guns. They haven't alleged that they had guns. What we saw were just people lining up in some formation. It's almost like a school assembly. Every school in this country every morning has an assembly of that kind. And they're also wearing uniform. It's not unlawful. There's nothing unlawful with what NUP people did. It is just that the perception that has already been formed in the minds of people in our security agencies is that NUP is an insurrectionist. And I think for me that's a byproduct of a system that's been holding on power for too long and is becoming unpopular. It now sees everything as an attempt to dislodge it from power using unlawful means. What the NUP people did in their offices really offends no law. None that I know of. Scouts do that every day. Private security guards do that every day. If you go to football pitches in this country, nobody raises any concerns about it. But it is because it is NUP. It is because we have now characterized NUP and identified them in a certain prism. Ends our reaction to them.
So Timothy, the element of breaking into office the way they did, and yet you actually have the power to come in and say open in their presence and take whatever you want, instead of just breaking like a thug.
Yeah.
I don't understand that. Do they want an element of surprise, but they can still come?
Yeah.
And then you open the offices with you can still get a search warrant.
I think that this speaks to the earlier submission, really, that the approach that the state sometimes that opts to take for a legitimate cause is frustrated by a poor approach in terms of having some of this. And again, as you say, the state has all the power, it has all the mandate, and it could actually achieve whatever it did in a more clean, in a more legitimate, and a more decent manner, without causing all. But also, more importantly, if you look at the legal framework within the law, there's a total breach in terms of what really happened. But I think the bigger picture goes beyond the question of the raid. There's a clear message in terms of how the state would choose to deal with those that would be viewed as as either competitors or the colleagues in the alternate. And this is not the first time it's happening. We've seen that in Najana Kubi and the other political party.
The NRM candidate for the Kawempe by-election, who was nominated today, I think she's called Nambi.
Yeah.
I don't know her other name though. Clearly you could see after the nomination there's a procession, and she was getting into this earth mover or grade or caterpillar, whatever you want to call it, and then causing some kind of chaos on Gayaza Road, and vehicles not moving, but no tear gas, no fighting, nothing. This guy was just working with a few people, he's clobbered. I mean, I don't know, it's going to be very difficult to explain how you treat these people like this and then you let the other. And Kawempe is watching.
Yeah.
No, they see, if they were shameless about, they're now brazen. I think the word is brazen. It is a typical definition of impunity, that I'm going to come and do this and you can do nothing about it. And you have to read the statements coming from police. The police spokesperson, the son of an NRM historical who used to lecture in Chankwanzi, I don't know if you know that.
He's a guy from my village. He's a guy from my village. Okay.
Seems to have carried forward from his father. But the statement was that we are carrying out a search. Legally, a search is carried out using a certain procedure. You cannot come and search my residence in my absence. You must have a search warrant. You must then document what you have searched in the presence of authorities, people sign, to avoid foul play. What was being done was not a search. The police must stop being disingenuous. It's the same thing when we say people have been abducted and the police insist they were arrested. There's a clear process of arrest provided for in the Constitution. When you pick somebody and bundle them using force and you take them to places nobody knows, that can't be an arrest, because you must approach somebody, identify yourself, tell them why you're approaching them, and tell them why they're being arrested, read them their rights, allow them to call relatives, take them to a place that is gazetted. It's the same thing with this arrest, with these warrants and this search the police is claiming to have done. The police was breaking the law.
But gentlemen, if you look at how we behave, even the civilians, how they behave on this here in Kampala, how we drive, and I mean, everybody has fallen short tremendously. You look, today you'll be driving on the road and you'll see hundreds of boarders driving on a wrong whatever, with a lot of gusto that you need just to give way to them. And so somebody will be coming, everybody, those who can have their sirens and their Land Cruisers and all that, to push you off the road. And we're like, look, this is anarchy on the streets of Kampala. I mean, we are losing it as a country. Because this city is just anarchy. And I'm wondering, is there anybody in charge? Before we even talk about police, before we talk about the army, look at us, Nicholas.
Patrick, you cannot take away the primary responsibility of keeping law and order from the state. If a government minister cannot follow the law and drives on the wrong path, it becomes normal for all of us to do so, if and when we can. if it is normal for a government minister to employ their own sisters and brothers in the same office where they work and nothing happens, it becomes the norm. So the primary responsibility, that's why we pay taxes to government. Implement the law, enforce the law. The reason we are seeing, be strict, be a state. The reason why we are seeing what we are seeing is because the state has led us in a state of impunity. What stops me, Kamara, now from buying a drone and stopping you on the roadside and bundling you in a drone? People can't even tell the difference between the state and rogue elements doing that. It is because the state has really sat on its duty and encouraged impunity to happen. People watch and say, if he can do it, I can do it and get away with it. If I can call Kamara, who is a big man, and Kamara calls a policeman to let me go if he has arrested me, it becomes a norm. So I think the primary responsibility must rest with those who are leading us, those to whom we pay our taxes, those to whom we have ceded certain rights in return for peace and stability. The Kampala mess is a clear example of the mess in our governance.
It is coming from the leadership, because on a Kampala level, during the days of Jennifer Musisi, you'd see everybody is trying to follow the rules, the order. You're not riding on a pavement because you're scared. And that was becoming a culture. That was becoming us.
Absolutely. Patrick, you know, it doesn't go wrong.
Now we are being buried under rubbish.
Absolutely. So I was just saying that it never goes wrong, it starts wrong. And to this end, it's, you can relate it to where it should be have started. And we look at it from those that are actually charged with the responsibility.
I pity the man or woman who will take over from President Museveni at one point. When he hand over power to anybody, when his time is done, and maybe he wants to put this country right, he'll have to break a lot of stuff.
No,
he'll have to break a lot of stuff.
You have to.
If he has to build the nation and the state, because we have taken on a certain culture of impunity, whether it was civilian or military, and everybody is entitled. 40
years of that rule is what has led us to this place.
Yes, but you see, everybody wants to do things the way how they want. Let's believe it. There's a lot of freedom here. And but if anybody wants to...
That's chaos.
Because people do, it's chaos, but... and I'm telling you, if Nicholas, anybody wants to say, okay, now we're going to make sure things are going to work right, then you'll have to break a lot of stuff.
Patrick, there's a lot of work to be done,
and then that's
but
when
it is possible. It is very possible.
We shall cry for Museveni again.
No, I think that we find ourselves where we have to, cry, which is very unfortunate. But maybe just to emphasize the point that it's true there is a lot of work to be done. There is a lot of baggage that we have, but it is possible to have the country take it back within in the right track. It is very possible, and that we hope this is actually facilitated. Unfortunately, as we stand today, I think the whole masses are on the head of state, but it is possible to bring the country back on track.
As you try to conclude,
a wise man told me, when you are sweeping stairs, you don't sweep it from down going up. You start from up. He goes, that's how you sweep stairs. If you want to change this country, you must begin to sweep the stairs from up. Let us show leadership of example. You can't have leaders going around the country justifying corruption, theft of public resources. Leaders who are paid by taxpayers addressing a rally saying, we are stealing for you, we shall bring and share for you. We must begin to sweep the stairs from up. We must show good example, because if you begin to show that you break the law, however big you are, you will fall. The small guy will certainly fall in line.
So yesterday, there's a young man decided to set himself on fire near the Precinct of Parliament. I don't know his state of mind. But for what we've read, that he was angry because something happened to him, and the party he loved so much did not even come to rescue. What makes young people to be driven to that extent, despite of the fact that I cannot tell the state of mind of this person? That
You know, Kamara, if you look at the challenges that, and I think it's society broader, it's just that our demography is a reflection of young people and the frustrations that they continue to face, the economics, situation, and unfortunately most of those seems to be, taken in the direction of the politics, and that we've converted all our views and the perspective and the yardstick we measure, so everything is on the political yardstick. And that we've since relegated all, our mandate and everything to the politicians, and so you find that we've stepped back and we are at the mercy of of these politicians, and that if you look at how the economy is performing, when the question of jobs for the young people, and the challenges really in terms of how we are dealing with the rule of law, is frustrating. I think there is quite a number of frustration, and that whatever happened to the young man at the gate of Parliament is just a sneak peek of what is happening in the country.
But you know what is interesting? Whereas probably his intention was to be a Muhammad Bouazizi.
Not in Uganda. Yeah.
Ugandans ignored him. Yeah. But in the interest of time, Timothy, let's have the closing remarks. And beginning with you, what's going to be your parting shot?
I think that as a country, we have an opportunity to contribute to how we want the future to look like, and that can be contributed in many ways. I think that even as we approach in the election period, I think the clarion call is for the people to participate in these elections, to determine who their leaders are, but also more importantly, to contribute in any way possible in terms of how we are governed as a society, because it starts wrong. And how politics has been handled in this country by the politician undermines the rule of law, undermines services, undermines everything, and goes to the extent of the impunity that has actually become now a culture, and it's being now normalized within the society. So we still have a long way to go. We have a role to contribute as citizens, as the different players in making this country of what we want to be.
Thank you, Timothy. Nicholas, your parting shot.
I've had the chance to travel around the world. I've seen many countries. I've been lucky in that regard. Uganda is a beautiful country. Only if we led it better, only if we all cared for it as if it was our only home. Because I think that sometimes the actions of people in public office, and indeed actions of ordinary people, almost make you think they don't care about this country. All of us can only be safe if all of us are safe. You cannot hide behind your high walls, rear your German Shepherd, and think that is safety and security when the next door person is poor. At some point, the poor will outnumber the powerful and the rich, and they'll outrun you out of town. Make sure this country is a country of equity, equality, respect for human rights, and that political power must be used for the public good. It cannot be an end in itself. It's a beautiful country. We can make it better.
By the way, the last time I checked here, I'm told you moved out of Chapter 4.
Yes, I...
why did you move? Why did you move?
No, I've done...
Uganda people entrenched.
I've done my time.
The founders don't leave.
He failed the status quo.
No.
Yeah, but seriously.
No, I have done my time. I built an organization from scratch. I believe I've built an institution. The organization had become synonymous with me, and that is dangerous. And so I thought it was time to allow the next generation of leaders to take over.
You wanted to avoid the Ugandan syndrome of the founder syndrome.
I didn't want to be like President Museveni. He didn't want to leave. But also, you have people who have been grooming for the last 4 years to take over. This was not something we woke up and did one day and we left. We hired a consultant to do leadership growth, coaching, audit development, and after 4 years of that process, I felt comfortable
that
I could go elsewhere and thrive and let these guys reimagine the organization.
You should give us the template to
Thank
apply
you very
maybe.
much.
Oh, it's well documented. I'm happy to share.
I must say congratulations.
Thank you.
You built a system, and the system can sustain itself and move on. And I'm sure you have the continuity plan. And
sure.
We'll keep track on what is going on there.
Some people said I'd resign to go and contest elections. Let me assure you, I have no interest in contesting for any elections.
You know, sometimes this world is not bad because of the people who kill and maim and abuse. Sometimes this world is bad because good men like you are silent and don't want to lead.
Well, I'm here. I'm not silent. I'm leading.
Gentlemen, Nicholas Opio, I want to thank you so much. Mr. Timothy Chimongas, I want to thank you so much. We're getting into a very heated kind of moment. People will be coming to you asking the mandate to lead. But sometimes such times bring chaos in our country. And so, you know, I always host politicians here. And let me tell you this. Some of these politicians that you see are not enemies. I've seen them talk about business, talk about families, talk about trips. And yet, when you go to their constituencies, their supporters, you're busy fighting amongst them yourselves. And the people here are having coffee at the Serena. I see that. Because where I sit, I actually don't see any enmity among them. They can be NUP, they can be DP, they can be NRM. They are talking, they are doing business, and you guys, you shouldn't be fighting amongst yourselves. So you can be a supporter, you can go and do you cast your vote without violence, without all of things. But where we find ourselves as Ugandans, reminds me of that book from the Kenyan writer, the playwright, that sometimes some of us have also gone crazy. When the madness of the entire nation disturbs a solitary mind, that sometimes it's not enough to say the man is mad. The nation sometimes is driving us crazy. But I hope we can keep it together and be sane. Good night, and God bless Uganda.